Gold. Welcome back, David Valente, as well. David.
Hey, good morning.
He's in the Bill Stubblefield seat. Yeah. And also, let's say good morning to the longest tenured member of our crew, Mr. Mike Carl.
Good morning, everybody.
Also a Washington fan.
Yes.
Yeah. You haven't been talking them up as much, though.
Well, they're...
You going low-key on this?
I'm just holding my breath, but
waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Mr. Larry Schultz's team is still alive, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and I'm a bit of an Eagles fan, but it's not an obsession. That's going to be interesting this weekend. What happens with Hurts?
He's got a Hurts knee.
The backup guy is not going to be able to get it done.
So
they got two backup guys that have played, Pickett and Tyler McKee.
Yeah.
So Larry, do you think the refs are going to give Buffalo a chance?
I sure hope so.
Right.
I don't tend to operate on conspiracy theory analysis, though they've made that kind of difficult the last few weeks.
Well, I hear that they just threw a flag for unnecessary roughness on the quarterback. So
yeah.
I mean,
that will happen.
Yeah, it will.
They'll start off with a 15.
Even if two other guys hit their heads together, they'll say, "Oh yeah, you targeted the guy who didn't get hit."
Well, you hit them too close to Mahomes.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Let's say good morning to Joe Ferretti by telephone as well. Joseph.
Hey, Larry, I think that all the backup quarterback for Philly has to do is to hand the ball to Saquon Barkley.
That could very well be the case, and that's right at the limit of Kenny Pickett's abilities, I think.
That is true. And Rob could attest to that.
The last time, though, Philly played Washington turned it over 5 times, and they won in a high-scoring game with like 36-33, something like that.
Yep.
Kenny Pickett came in after the score was 14-0, Philadelphia, I think, and he still managed to put up 33 points. So he wasn't horrible in that game, which, when you're talking about Kenny, is as good of a compliment.
They came from turnovers, though, too.
Well, no, yeah, but he did. He was the quarterback. It's kind of like Jim Justice was the governor when the state's economy was good. So you got to give him some credit for that, even though Mike Carl refuses to. He's biting his lip on that. Nothing still.
Doesn't this thing with the Commanders, Rob? It just shows in the NFL. You get a quarterback, and the whole outlook and performance of the team can change on a dime. It's amazing. That's why and I do this for one of our co-hosts this morning. That's why I can't understand what's going on out with the Chargers, because they have a quarterback, but they can't seem to get out of their way.
Same when they had Phillip Rivers.
Man, shots fired.
Right?
You're going to really bring up my Chargers? He had his worst game in the playoffs, Joe. Why are we going to start off like this?
I wanted to poke you. I wanted to poke the bear.
Isn't Jim Harbaugh their coach?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Could be an issue.
Great guy.
I think when you talk about Washington, Joe, your point is a great one. It's a quarterback-driven league. You go from 4 wins to 12 wins. They haven't lost a game in 2 months. And the kid, every time I want to count that team out in the playoffs, he makes a play. And
it's phenomenal.
Next thing you know, they're right back in it, and then they win it. Now, no rookie quarterback has ever gotten his team to the Super Bowl. A few have gotten him to the conference championship game, but no rookie quarterback has gotten his team to a Super Bowl.
Let's hope this is the first.
It's a challenge. So,
wasn't Brady a rookie?
No.
He was not a rookie.
He was not his second year.
Yes.
Well, his first year starting, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that is technically
but Ben
not your
did
rookie
that
year.
too, so first year starting.
Ben got to the AFC championship game, and he threw it away. By the way, he couldn't have played much worse. So anyway, we move on here to some serious topics, which is part of the Friday Five's purpose for being here. And our leadoff hitter is Mr. Joseph Joey Torts. Ready? Joe, you're up.
Rob, I want to assure you and the audience that I did some homework regarding my topic. And in fact, I checked in with Larry Schultz. I had a discussion with Mike Hornby last night. I'm going to reserve some subjects for them to discuss. They're probably in a better position than I am. And for my own mental health, I don't want to discuss Donald Trump. So I have a subject that's a little bit more broad, but I think it's relevant to the upcoming legislative session. So let me try to draw that connection. I was reading Fortune magazine, and they published a study from Wallet Hub, which is a web platform for financial services. It's an annual survey done by Wallet Hub of all the states. Thousands of people are surveyed, and they they construct from the survey a happiness scale across the country. Well, the results are in for 2024. The happiest state in the country, and this is no surprise, is Hawaii. And I suspect being over 1,000 miles removed from the mainland is probably a good thing. West Virginia came in 48th in terms of the happiness scale. We were 50th in 2023. We're now bumped up to 48th. Concerned me a little bit, and I wondered, why are we an unhappy state? Especially when, and this was striking to me, Rob, and I'll certainly like your comments this morning on this, the second happiest state after Hawaii on this scale was the state of Maryland. So why is West Virginia faring so poorly in terms of how its citizens think their lives are going? Why are they unhappy? Well, the categories that the survey looked at, and these are pretty generalized categories, they look at the social well-being, okay, your engagement in activities with others, and the chances to mingle with folks, the physical aspects of life, your parks and recreation, your infrastructure, economic. Okay, what's our income compared to other people across the country? Are there investment opportunities? Is there money anxiety? Is there upward mobility? And of course, emotional health, which is, do people think there's the promise of tomorrow? Do you feel safe in your home? I suspect, as I look at my own life in West Virginia, which spanned over 35 years, that we do fare well in some of these categories. Thinking back to my own life and how I was able to raise kids and enjoy myself immensely in the state of West Virginia. But I think my conclusion is that our unhappiness primarily is in economics. 20% of the counties in West Virginia are considered by the U.S. Census Bureau to be in persistent poverty. Some people conclude that, well, not enough West Virginians want to go to work and earn money. 76% of people living below the poverty line in West Virginia are employed. So I think there's a work ethic in the state. I think people want to work. I think they want to be industrious, but they can't seem to get ahead, and they have a lot of financial anxiety, a lot of vulnerabilities they think that they have to deal with because of their socioeconomic standing. So how do we deal with this, and how do we raise ourselves on this happiness scale? Well, my concern is that we have a legislature about to go into session, and I see talented people who have been primarily focused on economics, people like Eric Tarr, Eric Nelson, Craig Blair. I don't think they're going to be there, or if they are, they're going to be backbenching in this upcoming legislature. I'm concerned about the kind of legislature we're going to have and whether or not they're going to focus on the issues that are going to get this state moving better economically, get people out of these doldrums, and not resorting to opioids, not succumbing to abuse and neglect in the household, which again I think is all tied into the economic vulnerabilities in the state. So my concern is the legislature going to do what's necessary for the state of West Virginia coming up, or are we going to have focus on other things that don't move the ball forward? Because we got to get in a situation where our citizens in the state are happy. So my question is, what can we do in West Virginia to make people happier?
All right. Mr. Hornby, you're a member of the legislature, and that was mentioned by Mr. Ferretti in terms of the upcoming session and what you guys will do. What do you got?
So I'm presuming this survey through Wallet Hub or whatever you mentioned, Joe, was probably done before the election, and that's why West Virginians were so unhappy. I would say that if you did that survey today, most of West Virginia is extremely happy. At least 70% of West Virginia is extremely happy. As far as focusing on the big issues, I know the House legislature is changing everything that the way we do so that we can pass better policy and fix actual problems instead of just passing bills. So while I agree with most of what you said, Joe, I think timing is everything. I think West Virginia is extremely happy, and I think we've got a very positive future. And I'll leave it at that.
Sounds like a stump speech, like he's running for office. Mr. Carl, you've lived in this state longer than anybody in the room. What do you have for me?
Well, there's a reason that I stayed here, because I had, opportunities to be elsewhere. So I'm not unhappy being here, and so I agree, with the first comments that I question the real legitimacy of this survey. But what were the questions the people responded to, and I just am skeptical about that. It's so clear that we're unhappy, and this moving up to a couple notches over the past year or so. That's that trend. I would probably agree with, but where they started was not. I'm skeptical of that.
Well, let's take out the questions and such, because they were the same questions for everybody in every state. So let's remove that, and let me ask you from a more observational commentary standpoint. What are the weaknesses of the state? What are the areas that need the most improvement?
Well, we have a diverse geography that, and that, I was not happy, as a West Virginian back in the the 60s and 70s particularly, but I'm and this is partisan, I'm certainly, but I think the shift of the political control was starting to improve things, and it's also the neighbor states. Kentucky is the only one that's Eastern Kentucky is the only one that's kind of like us.
Through Appalachia.
Yeah. It's just it's all part of the same culture, but as a whole state, Kentucky is strong and wealthy, and certainly Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia are four of the best states in terms of individual life that the country has.
I think this is a challenging question, Joe, because one, we're in the Eastern Panhandle, and it's not that everybody in the Eastern Panhandle is doing well economically, but certainly when you look at the rest of the state and compare it in general as a whole, the Eastern Panhandle doesn't identify with many of the problems that the rest of the state has. Mr. Valente, what do you got for me?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the fact that we're, from our perspective, we're in the Eastern Panhandle. It doesn't look as bad. Go anywhere else in West Virginia, and the economic realities of what is going on in West Virginia hit you. You see people are not poor, they're po. They can't even afford the O and the R.
Who did that joke? That was somebody years ago.
I think it was Chris Rock, maybe.
It's a good one.
Yeah, but it's it's not just our perspective. There are actual hardships in this state, and I think if you can pull ourselves out of the Eastern Panhandle bubble and take a look at what's going on in the rest of the state, for us in the Eastern Panhandle, we're so disconnected because there are no straight lines in West Virginia. You have to go to another state to get to anywhere else in West Virginia. So I think we have a different perspective on what's going on in West Virginia, but there are problems here in the Eastern Panhandle as well. We are dealing with and I think a lot of it is economics, in the fact that our teachers are struggling because they make so much less than their counterparts 10, 15 miles up and down the road. There's a struggle here that still the ghosts of the opioid crisis are still hitting us in many ways. There are lots of things that are going on in West Virginia that are not hunky-dory, and I don't think the election of Donald Trump really improves the day-to-day outlook of the average West Virginian. Yes, they may see changes coming on, but I think for the most the average voter, the average person in West Virginia views politics like the Olympics. It comes around every 4 years. You talk about it for 2 weeks and it goes away. And you are then faced back again with the economic crises that you have at home, whether you can make your power bill, whether you can, get the house ready for winter, the things that are very much local that Donald Trump or even the Republicans in Charleston can't really help you with.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes. First of all, on a positive note, West Virginia, Joe didn't mention it, but I will, leads the nation in 2 categories, of which I'm aware. One is opioid overdose deaths, sadly, and the other one is deer auto collisions per capita. Anyway, so we do have some bright spots.
How are those bright spots?
We're number one.
They're terribly bad bright spots. Look, if you're a child in Elkins who goes to high school there and goes to the local college, Davison Elkins, is that in Elkins?
Yes.
And you get a degree in accounting, you are leaving West Virginia, almost certainly.
No, you're getting a job in Charleston.
Well,
We need a lot of them.
yeah, well,
Especially in governments.
or you may get outbid.
Right.
You may get a better offer
that
in
is-
Richmond
you are
or
very
in the Maryland state capital or in Harrisburg or in any other state you can drive to. One of the things that's driving this sadness, it's older folks, and their kids are 6 hours, 7 hours by car away. There comes a point, Mike, I'm starting to get there. You probably know this feeling. Jumping in your car for a 7-hour trip ain't quite the thrill it used to be. And so you start thinking about, well, is there somewhere halfway where I could stay in a hotel? So there's that part of it, I believe, that's driving some of this. But it's all, to me, opportunity, economic opportunity driven. And if you go to Shepherd, get a 4-year teaching degree, you can work in West Virginia, and lots of people do because they always wanted to help their schools. But boy, Hagerstown's awful close. Hancock's awful close to Berkeley Springs. And 25 years ago, my wife at the time changed jobs to the same job in Hancock that she had in Berkeley Springs and got 40% more money. She was driving an extra 12 miles one way. That's the kind of opportunity issue we need to get addressed. And we need to make it possible for kids to say, once I get my degree, I ain't going nowhere. I'm staying right here, getting a job at such and such company, and I know the price will be competitive and the house prices will be fair and so forth.
Well, I think that's where you got to give Craig Blair and Eric Householder, Paul Espinosa some credit. These guys who've been in the legislature for a long time, they have made those investments into economic development around the state. Nucor has been amazing for that county. There are many projects across the state that are being addressed so that we are not exporting our youth, like you said, Larry. And I think that is a major point that you're making.
There's definitely no question we're exporting them in Morgan County.
Yeah.
I mean,
and whether you're exporting them
export.
to Berkeley or whether you're exporting them to D.C. area, we will never be competitive with Loudoun County, like for the jobs, or with the federal government being so close. It's just, that's the reality of it. We need to just give more opportunity within our state so they don't have to go. And I think we made some strides, especially in cybersecurity, in aviation. There's been some real efforts and investments made that I think are going to pay off in the future. It's still not there, like you're saying, but I think we're getting there.
I always tell people that Morgan County's in the import-export business. We import 65-year-olds who sell their houses in suburban D.C. and move to the country, and we export 22-year-olds. That's not a model that's going to survive very well, because pretty soon your whole county, after a decade or two, your whole county is a nursing home. And then there are some opportunities in the nursing home industry for nurses and so forth, but that's not a growth industry. It shouldn't be, anyway.
It's also good for the funeral home industry.
Yes.
And by the way, we are sponsored by Brown Funeral Homes and Cremations. So I encourage more seniors to move to the area. Our person who introduced this issue is Mr. Ferretti. Joe, Mr. Hornby, you can go in a second. I want to bring it back to Joe quickly.
Yeah, let me shoot down Mike Hornby on his own show. And in 2018, in the midst of the first Trump administration, West Virginia ranked 50th on this same survey. So it's really not tied into who's sitting in the Oval Office. What I think it's tied to, and I think Larry hit on this, is it's economics. If you look at these other factors they considered, I think West Virginia fares fairly well. I love our parks and recreational opportunities. I think we have a lot of social organizations and social interaction if you want it. And I think in terms of just where we live, and the climate and everything else, it's wonderful. I enjoyed it immensely. But I do know that economically we continue to be depressed. And I think there's a direct connection between our statistics regarding opioid abuse and economics. I think there's a direct connection between our levels of abuse and neglect that occur in the household and economics. Listen to what the previous guest talked about in terms of how these systems are overwhelmed. I think it's socioeconomic. And I think this legislature, who's about to go into session, I'm hoping that despite the absence of people that we just talked about, like the Craig Blairs and Eric Tars and Eric Nelsons and those folks who were really focused on economics, I fear this legislature coming up is going to be focused on other things. And I don't think worrying about library books and criminalizing librarians is going to be the direction this state needs to go. Mike Hornby, I hope you're going to assure me that the central focus of this upcoming legislature is going to be efforts to continue to improve the economic lives in the state so that we have an opportunity to be more happy. So child care, child tax credits, earned income tax credits, those things that allow people to continue to work, go out and get jobs, more funding for Blue Ridge. These things, where people can get training for vocations. This is where the state needs to focus. And I'm fearful, looking at the leadership that we have in the legislature now, that we're going to be going down the wrong path.
Mike, you get a minute to retort.
Yeah, last time I checked, I wasn't king of West Virginia just yet. I am working towards that, but there are
I'm supporting this.
There are 90 other people in the legislature that don't like my idea of being king. So I can't assure you of anything, Joe. I can assure you what I will do, and that is continue to make West Virginia a better place to live. I think I just read a new ranking where we are number 3 in the country of imports. We're actually growing our population. We're in the 45 to 65 category. We're actually really good too. We're still lacking in the 18 to 30s. I understand that. That's where we're exporting. But there are people moving to West Virginia because of the economic status that we have, our lower taxes, the cost of living is still low. We still have trees and things like that. Not a big city. We don't have any big cities. So I push back just a little on that.
Gilstrap moving here alone accounts for an increase of 2% in the state income tax.
Yep.
You got to have more Gilstraps.
No kid.
He's back Monday, by the way. Joe, thank you. Good leadoff shot.
Okay.
Mr. Valente, you were on the clock, along with Mr. Hornby, as we get out of this first hour, brought to you in part by the Berkeley County Health Department's Quick Response Team and by Larry DeMarco and Company at Century 21 Modern Realty Results. This is Talk Radio, WRR Martinsburg, and Television 10. Produced by the sports doctor Colin McLaughlin, assisted by Alec Epperson, and brought to you in part by eldercare attorney Danny Staggers in Martinsburg at 304-267-3915. Also by WVU Medicine, Berkeley Medical Center, Jefferson Medical Center, and by Hagerstown Ford, where you can get your next vehicle without stepping in the showroom. They'll deliver it to you. You don't like it, they take it back at Hagerstown Ford. Also, they'll do the service that way, too. They bring the service to you. In studio, we welcome in our Friday Five. First via telephone, Mr. Joseph Joey Tots Ferretti. Joe, good morning again.
Good morning.
Mr. Lawrence Schultz.
Great to be here.
Attorney at law. Mr. Michael Carl, senior member of the crew.
Good morning to everybody.
And Delegate Michael Hornby.
The abuse continues.
Hasn't been that bad so far.
Is that because he called you the delegate?
Delegate, you're not okay with being
Delegate
called
Height, you need to be back in this chair. This is the last time I'm doing this show.
You're doing great, baby. You're doing great. Pretty soon you'll be able to go to Charleston. You'll be away for a while.
Yeah.
Everything will be fine. St. Leo's Variety Show, final night for auditions is tonight, by the way, between 6 and 8. That's in the Parish Hall at 2109 Sulphur Springs Road. And the Berkeley County Sheriff's Office is hiring. They've got a test coming up, and the application deadline's coming up, too. Call 304-264-1927, extension 6019.
I will
Find out
send you
more.
the bill, Rob.
You're quite welcome, sir.
Rob Blair.
Issue number 2. Mr. David Valente in the Bill Stubblefield seat.
Buongiorno tutti.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Hey, you complained about my last time saying Guten Morgen, so
Yeah, you broke out some German last
yeah, I
time.
broke out some German. I can do some Swedish.
There's some who appreciate it.
Yeah, there we go. So, Donald Trump gets inaugurated, and this is not just Donald Trump. This question goes to over the last month, 2 months since the election, we've seen pardons for the judge that did the Cash for Kids case in Pennsylvania. We've seen pardons for the January 6th committee. We've seen, and these are preemptive pardons for Dr. Fauci and people associated with the COVID medical, the vaccine and everything within the federal government. After Trump takes office, we see the pardons for the January 6th protesters, the people who are in prison, including some very unsavory folks like the Enrique Tarrio and the 3%er guy. We're also seeing executive orders. This week I got an email saying that I need to report people who do DEI work. The entire DEI staff at my agency and every other agency has been put on administrative leave pending a reduction in force order, which is essentially being laid off. We are in an era of government by revenge. And, it's not going to get better at this point. Because 4 years from now, we're going to have another election. We're going to have a new president. Regardless of the guy from Tennessee putting in a constitutional amendment to have Trump get a third term, which is actually the premise behind that movie Civil War that came out last year, the president getting a third term. We're going to have a new administration, and it very well may be a Democratic administration coming in. And I often say that we create the cudgel with which we are eventually beaten. And these executive orders that are going through, these governmental orders, the revenge that we're seeing is eventually going to turn around. And the people that are benefiting now are going to face the repercussions in the future. My question to you all is the government... Is the United States a fundamentally broken system now?
Is the United States a fundamentally broken system, thereby a fundamentally broken nation? As a broader question. Mr. Michael Carl, chance for you to chip in here and either defend or further the point Mr. Valente has made.
Well, I don't think we're broken, and I think the system worked. I think the last presidential election was a great example of the system working. And I don't share these concerns. I mean, we have too much. The federal government too big and bureaucratic, and we need to clean that up some. But we need a strong national defense. Trump is. He's not somebody that's a pleasant person certainly, but he acts on things that I think show the quality of the substantive policies that that matter. That we need the free enterprise system and America's role in it worldwide. But we need national security. We need strong defense. So, but I'm not concerned that things are broken. In fact, I think just the opposite. I think this last election and the growth of the Republican membership in the two legislative bodies and the way the Supreme Court has been working, I think all are positive. And so I haven't lost, faith in the quality of our system.
So going back to the first segment where you surveyed, you'd be a happy West Virginian right now.
Yeah, well, a happy American, but the West Virginia is getting better, and I've been around here longer than anybody in this room, and it's getting better. Now, there's deviations, and the few members of the legislative majority that want to get into social issues, that's mistaken, but hopefully and fortunately I believe the leadership will keep the focus on improving the economic system, improving the government, and cutting the waste of the government and the allocation of authority. We need more local control.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, I don't believe that we are fundamentally broken at this time. I do believe that we have elected and inaugurated a president who is trying to break certain parts of the American system. And I'll go no further than one of his first executive orders to be stayed, which is the attack on the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. You don't get to amend the Constitution. Sorry to have to tell you that. And I'm sorry to have to tell him that for a couple of reasons. First of all, it should be obvious to any 8th grade civics student that the president just doesn't get to say, okay, this part of the Constitution, we're scrubbing that out. And so it makes me think that even Donald Trump is smart enough to see that there's no single ever going to be a way that a president can overrule the 14th Amendment. And therefore, knowing full well that it was bogus, he did it anyway. I think that's a signal that that's somebody trying to break us. I don't believe that has happened yet. And so I agree with a lot of what David said, but the challenge is on us now. And that, if you are a local or a state law enforcement officer, you got to be a little disturbed by the pardons of the people who attacked those cops at the Capitol. And what does that mean for the future? I think if I had a child who was a state police officer in West Virginia, I would advise them to buy more life insurance, because I don't believe this is going to be nationally a good thing for police officers to basically scrub the record clean from people who, we've all seen the video, beat police officers with clubs. So, yeah, we're not broken yet, but I agree we're on the way to being broken if we do not fight every single one of these lunatic ideas that are in that huge sheaf of executive orders that was passed.
Michael Hornby, you literally came here from a country that broke right in front of you. You were in the midst of the Civil War and where it broke, and now you're here in America. Is this country broken?
This country is far from broken. I think our system is the best system and the best country in the world. I've lived in many, and I've traveled through over 100. This country still, the American dream is still alive. If you work hard, you can succeed. I don't care where you come from. And what your socioeconomic status is, there is a path to success in this country. As far as like executive orders and pardons, listen, Joe pardoned a whole bunch of people on the way out. Donald pardoned a bunch of people on the way in. Executive orders happened, when Joe came in, he cut off the pipeline, he stopped our energy production. Those are things that the president has the right to do. So As far as the 14th Amendment goes, Larry, I tend to agree with you there. He can't go against the Constitution unless it goes to a vote or things like that. So, but when I look at the country as a whole, this past election was a mandate. I happened to be in D.C. on Monday. It was absolutely bucket list day for me. There were a lot of happy people. The town was buzzing. There was hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people lining the streets and celebrating. So, and based on the voters and what they did, I tend to agree with my call. I think we're on the way back. This country is not broken. We're being mended. And that's my thoughts.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, I agree. It's not broken, but I feel that some of the foundational pillars of society are being stressed. There seems to be we're in a game now of political one-upsmanship, and it's going in a bad direction. It used to be up until about 20 days ago that unsavory pardons that could be questioned by a vast majority of people in the country, were done on the way out. Well, now we just have a president come in who was going to engage in one-upsmanship, and on day one he was going to pardon a whole bunch of unsavory characters and with questionable pardons, including the guy Ross Ulbricht who ran the online drugstore and ruined plenty of lives. He's out now. So that's the direction that concerns me. Yes, you can come in with a policy like we want to stamp out DEI, and you can issue an executive order saying that all federal agencies no longer engage in DEI. Okay, fine. You won the election. That's your mandate. You can issue an executive order that says, well, we want also to include in that all private businesses who do public contracts, government contracts. Okay, well, you got to reverse a 1965 executive order that's been in place for 60 years from Lyndon Johnson. But okay, you won the election. I guess that's your mandate. But when your mandate is interpreted to be that you now also want federal agencies to identify private companies, publicly traded corporations, nonprofits, large foundations, to get people to snitch on them to see if they're doing DEI, well, aren't we going in the wrong direction here? For my Republican friends who are worried about government regulation, are you concerned at all that there's now an executive order saying that federal agencies are going to be spying on private companies to see if they're doing DEI? Are these companies not free in this country to do business the way they want to? These are the kinds of directions that concern me. So while we can sit back and say, yeah, there's a mandate, and yes, the Trump policies are great for the country, let's look at those policies carefully and understand what's afoot here. This is one-upsmanship politically, and I think therein lies the dangers for the country.
Comes back to you, David Valente, for a final thought.
I think with this, what I hear a lot from everybody here is a very limited view of what is going on. They're looking at what has happened the last year, maybe even the last election beforehand. You got to extend your view on this thing. We are getting more executive orders per president than we ever have, completely bypassing the legislative process. They're getting bolder in what they're claiming. I know that you all like what's going on with the Supreme Court. There's a concern that if you get a friendly enough Supreme Court, that he's going to be able to rewrite the Constitution by executive order. And again, we're getting into a position where we're governing by revenge. We're issuing executive orders to strike previous executive orders. We're rooting out things that we don't like. And can government be made more efficient? Absolutely. I can give you chapter and verse on where government can be made more efficient. Turning government employees into spies in a neo-McCarthyist play to root out DEI is not the way to do it. Putting people on administrative leave just because they were in office that did DEI doesn't mean that those folks can't do other jobs within the federal government. the idea that
30 seconds, Dave.
It feels like they're blowing up the government just to accomplish small things, and we're only going to see it get worse with subsequent administrations correcting what they think went wrong in the past.
Issue number 3, Mr. Michael Hornby.
Yeah, let's bring it back locally, kind of what Joe and maybe following up with the new governor acting quickly with multiple executive orders, ranging from school choice, cessation of DEI, more efficient government, vaccine exemptions, to an economic backyard brawl, and a legislature that is leaning more and more conservative based on the votes of the people in West Virginia. How do you see this upcoming session going, and what do you expect?
Let's go right back to Michael Carl on this one. Mr. Carl.
Well, I'm generally optimistic about the session and the leadership of the new governor, although Craig Blair is somebody we're going to miss, and because he had a record that built a lot of confidence, and I'm sorry he's not at least presently in the picture. But I'm pretty optimistic, and I think Morrissey is someone who really understands, how the system works, the politics, the legal structure of the system, and I think he's someone who will put the emphasis where it needs to be, which is improving the efficiency of government. And hopefully, because his base was here, he will also move us toward more local control of things that matter.
Larry Schultz.
I believe that this coming governorship will, because of what some other folks have said here and the nature of the campaign that we just went through, is going to be largely focused not on West Virginia's horrible economic problems that we talked about in the earlier segment, but a whole bunch of cultural issues, like what books should be available to a fifth grader to read in the public schools. Morrissey has publicly spoken about some of these issues. And so they are going to play to those things. There's only so much time in a legislative session. There's an awful lot of things that could be improved in terms of making it a better life available for West Virginians. And I am afraid that we are instead going to be focused on social, cultural issues that people believe will make us more holy. And I would like to see us become more successful. Holiness to me is kind of a private thing that you take care of through the week and on Sundays if that's your way. I don't need the government to lecture me about holy. And so I'm very afraid that we're going to spend an awful lot of time on loopy social issues.
Bring my mic up more. Mr. Valente.
I completely agree with Larry. I think this legislature and the next at least 2 years will be heavily focused on not just cultural issues, but driven by national narrative. That we won't. We've seen candidates come through here that have actually been elected to the state legislature that seem to be running for U.S. Congress rather than the state legislature, and they're going to bring their view of how the issues of the Republican Party as a whole in the nation, the focus towards cultural issues are going to be the touch point for them throughout the next couple legislatures at the very least. In the absence of a official opposition party, we may see a split within the Republican caucus along cultural and economic lines. But I think that the culture warriors are now in ascendancy within the Republican caucus, and will be the larger of the two parties in the state legislature, and it will be governed accordingly.
Mr. Ferretti.
Yeah, I think the elections for leadership, especially in the Senate, have given me pause, and I think at least offer a hint as to the direction that some of the legislative efforts will take for this upcoming session. And I fear that what we're going to see are House members and Senate members jumping up and grabbing the microphone on the floor and arguing about the wokeness of a company like Form Energy as a means of thwarting some of the economic development opportunities that exist for this state. I have never understood the Form Energy argument, and I think it's in microcosm. I think it is an example of some of the problems we have here. That is a company that's going to pay good wages and draw people with technical skills into the state for a technology that is going to be the future for this country. And for the life of me, I've never understood the debate over that, and I think that is just an example of what some of the hurdles are for the state so that we can continue to develop economically and get more of our citizens out of that financial anxiety that they experience daily.
Comes back to you, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think the headlines are going to grab onto the cultural issues, but I do think we will still focus very much so on the economics of the state. I think there will be some conservative movements in those directions, but I do think even with Randy Smith, I think he's still focused. He's a coal miner from down south. He knows his area. He still wants to lift his area up and make it economically viable. So I think you will be pleasantly surprised this year on what we attack and what we accomplish.
There is a thought that you can't do both at the same time.
You definitely can. There's 100 of us just in the House. Everybody's got ideas. There's 22 different committees, all working on different issues at the same time. And then it comes down to, we can't fix all the problems in 60 days, but we can certainly try and attack the big policy issues that we still haven't.
You're the caucus chair. What would you estimate to be the mix between the typical Chamber of Commerce Republican versus the Social Causes Republican?
60-40.
In which direction?
Probably people that are interested in moving West Virginia forward to 60%, and the other 40 are interested in that too, but they are still focused on, or they are really focused on liberty too. So, and we all are working together at this point. We haven't been divided just yet. There may be a small 8 to 10 folks that wish the Capitol burns down, but for the most part, I think the feeling of the caucus is we can work forward as long as we're getting everybody's priorities done.
What was the mix the previous election, would you say?
65-35. So, I mean, it's
not that, it's gradual.
It's gradual.
Do you think, as David said, in a couple of elections it will tip the other way?
Well, I mean, either that or we're not going to have any Democrats. They thought they were going to pick up 8 seats. They lost 1, so they've only got 9 now. They're trying to finagle their way to 10, but I don't know. It's all going to depend on how this legislature works and what we can accomplish.
Larry Schultz, you are on the clock. Mr. Michael Carl, 2 in the next segment. This one brought to you in part by elder care attorney Danny. As always, the show during the commercials is, that's probably something we should record off air and then put on the website later on the Facebook page. This segment of our program today brought to you by the Skinner Accident and Injury Attorneys at SkinnerWins.com, by the Wagner Law Firm, West Virginia's premier DUI defense attorneys, by WVU Medicine, Berkeley Medical Center, Jefferson Medical Centers. We move on to issue number 4. We are joined in studio by Michael Hornby, Michael Carl, David Valente, Joseph Ferretti by telephone, and with issue number 4 in studio, Lawrence Schultz.
Yes, President Trump has now pardoned hundreds of convicted criminals who attacked police on video that all of us saw on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. What message does this send to career law enforcement professionals, many of whom are lifelong Republicans? Will the Republican Party still be able, after this, to say they back the blue?
Mr. Carl.
Well, first of all, you've exaggerated the extent of the violence and assault that was involved. There's a very small number of the people who got these pardons were charged with actual attacks. The 90+% of the people who were charged were exercising their absolute constitutional right to protest in a peaceful political way. Now,
so there was only 150 people who went into the Capitol, Mike?
no,
That seems ridiculous.
no,
You
the
don't
Capitol.
get
The Capitol is a public building,
And they trashed it, and they wiped they
but-
wiped feces on the wall.
not all of them. That's my point. In fact, very few of them did that. That's my point. And
They got pardoned too.
and that was a mistake. I agree. So
What do we say to our police officers? I mean, what do we say to them? The federal government decided that somebody wearing a badge and telling you to stop can be assaulted and tackled, and they'll let them out of jail.
You take a survey of law enforcement people all over America, including in D.C., and you're going to find that a lot of them, the majority of them, respect the law and order system and the conservative system, and are not ready to blanket prosecute people for exercising their First Amendment rights and their rights as voters.
David Valente.
Why was there a rush to pardon all of these people? Like, you could have taken a little bit of time and said, okay, we're going to look at these guys and see what they were convicted for, and keep the people that attacked, beat, smashed the head in of a few police officers, keep those people in prison. But no, they just blanket pardoned them for what? Like, there is no reason that they needed to be pardoned day one. Even if he made the promise to pardon them day one, they could have been spending the two, part of the 2 months having people dedicated to reviewing the cases of those people and saying which ones were, attacking the police and which ones weren't, and then had a targeted pardoning. But when you attack a police officer, and then you just blanket pardon people like that, you're not sending a great message to the law enforcement community. Honestly, the Republicans are going to continue to say that they back the blue. The gaslighting is now the national sport of America, and we'll continue to hear back the blue, and we'll hear stringent criminal justice, defenses within the Republican community. But the problem is the proof in the pudding when it came to actually standing up for police officers who were actually attacked and beaten is that they failed them at the critical moment.
Mr. Hornby.
Yeah, I mean, Trump campaigned on this. He said he was going to do it, and he did it. My question would be, and I think the reason for the pardons, I certainly don't condone anybody beating a police officer or pushing a police officer or doing that kind of thing. But the sentences were so exorbitant. If I was to mildly assault a police officer in Berkeley County, I might get a misdemeanor and a fine. But 99 years in prison or these exorbitant sentences was the reason he had to do the pardon, because he believed that these people, there were some people that just were trespassing. They came in after the fact. I'm not condoning the Proud Boys or anything like that. But the sentencing on every single person that walked into the Capitol, because there were grandmothers and people that walked in 15 minutes after the doors were and just walked around, and they were charged with felony trespassing and things. And that's, I think, the reason he had to do it day one. He campaigned on it. There has never been a president that's been more pro-police officer and pro-law enforcement than Donald Trump. We certainly didn't have a defund the police movement under Donald Trump, even though the riots of the summer of whatever it was, there weren't a lot of arrests then. Nobody seemed to care then. So, you know, to say that he now no longer loves the police, that's just, it's a silly question in my mind, and I completely disagree with that premise.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, Mike, the Fraternal Board of Police came out, and other police unions came out and condemned this, and, as they should, obviously. And I think what you did is just make the case for discernment. What President Trump campaigned on was, yes, he was going to look at pardoning these people, but he was going to do it with discretion. His vice president, 7 days before the actual pardons were signed, said, obviously, we're not going to pardon people who engaged in violence. Well, there was no discernment. There was no discretion. He just blanket pardoned everybody, including the worst of the worst in terms of behavior inside the Capitol. And what concerns me, and FBI studies show this going back to the 1930s and the KKK, anytime these extremist groups, like these present-day Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, anytime they have some sort of victory, whether it's in the media or in the courts, their recruitment grows. Their boldness grows. And so if you look at this from the perspective of the average American who has maybe some concern about safety and law enforcement and law and order and personal responsibility, this act of the president in not exercising discretion, maybe pardoning the trespassers, but the people who engaged in violence, who on their way out of the jail cell said they would still hang Nancy Pelosi from a lamppost, as Stuart Rhodes said. Those kinds of folks should not have been pardoned. And I think if there's going to be criticism from a wide body of the politic here, it's going to be, why wasn't there any discretion? As David said, why the rush? He could have pardoned some, and he could have left the others who deserved to be in jail stay there. He didn't, and I see that as a real problem.
I would also note, just as a legal point, you can always commute a person's sentence without granting them a pardon. He did some commutations, but for the most part, all of the really violent people got pardons, which means they never committed a crime. They were pardoned. Now, as a civil matter, it doesn't mean that. As a civil matter, if they accept the pardon, they're conceding that they committed the crime. But it removes their conviction from their record.
Derek Evans, who was a delegate for a moment in West Virginia, has been sending out press releases since he declared his candidacy, and one of the things he does is he frames himself as a patriot, and then sent out a press release about being pardoned, and then he finally had justice has been done, and his record is cleared. He's now free. In his email that he sent out, he also said it's time to go after the judges who impeached these judges, who prosecuted these folks. That's the next logical step in these pardons. Go after the judges.
Yeah.
Logical?
This is a guy, Rob, this is a guy who, when he was in front of a judge getting his sentence, cried, remorseful about what he did, then walked outside of the courtroom and spouted off about how he'd do it again. That guy's an embarrassment.
And he's also running for Senate against Shelley Moore Capito, by the way. I think that, and hear me out on this one, I think that President Trump is one of the greatest salesmen ever, right, in terms of a hype building and such. And here's my conspiracy theory on this. Now, hear me out for a second, okay? I think this is great for profits in the Trump business. And I'm assuming that he's got the market on this. The message this sends out is, if you're going to have a riot, if you're going to attack, especially if you're going to attack police, just bring these trademarked Trump flags with you as you attack.
Yes.
And I will pardon you. That's the message that I'm getting from this. And if you go to our website right now, you can get 2 flags for the price of 1. Take a friend with you to the next rally.
And you might get a My Pillow for $14.88.
So that's my theory on this one. I think this is profit motive to sell more merchandise, because it's all about the merch sales. It always is. The movie, you get so much profit. It's the merch that drives the extra money to put you over the top. Did you get your final word, Larry?
Yes.
It's your number 5, Mr. Michael Carl.
Real quick, what do you think are the implications for the global warming issue? One of the the tremendous wildfires in California, and at the other end of the spectrum, the historically cold weather that's moved over Texas and Louisiana and so forth.
I know Bill Stubblefield wishes he was here for this one.
Yeah.
He is a geologist and climatologist of some sort as well, too. So he is not, but Mr. Valente, you are in his seat, so you get the first knock at this one.
I think global warming is now saved. Trump is going to take his Sharpie marker and draw on the map of the United States, and he'll wipe out global warming, and we won't have to worry about it.
By executive order? Is that what you're saying?
By executive order and his magic Sharpie that somehow diverted the hurricane a couple of years ago. So that's my thought. Look, global warming is a feature now. We are going to be dealing with strange weather in strange places. This is not the first time that Texas has been hit by massive ice storms and snowstorms, but it's happening more frequently. And that's what we're going to have to get used to, is more frequent, more strange weather in strange places. It's not that California has not been a tinderbox. California goes through cycles of heavy rains, and I can't remember whether it's the El Nino season or the La Nina season, but they get heavy rains and then they dry up, and then you have the Santa Ana winds, and it's normal for a western state to go up in flames. It's where it's at, which is the big news story now, because it's at the foothills of Los Angeles. But we just, until we are going to focus on renewable energy and focus on nuclear energy and focus on energy that is sustainable and not going to drive up the pollutants in the atmosphere, we're going to have to deal with global warming and get used to hurricanes hitting in the middle of North Carolina and ice storms on the Gulf of America, and more intense wildfires in the West.
The test of whether we have global warming or not.
Climate change really is the term we should be using.
Sure, yes, but the test of that is not whether there's local cooling somewhere. The test is, are the polar ice caps still melting or not? Because they've been measured for quite a long time, and they're melting. If we don't change our approach and do what we can to reduce the man-made part of it, I know there's a lot of dispute about what the man-made part is, but if we don't do something, that is going to continue, and wild weather is going to become a way of life. It's not. It's a global warming, not a local change of temperature. California's always been dry. We certainly did in suburban LA and in the edges of LA the same thing that West Virginia is managing to do on Route 9 between Berkeley Springs and Hedgesville. We built 9 million houses, didn't worry about the roads or the other infrastructure, made sure that the realtors got all their money and the developers got all their money, and now the people who live there are going to face the issue. Now, in California, the issue is their house is on fire. In Hedgesville, the issue is it takes you 20 minutes to get to Sheets, where it should take 5. And so, there's always going to be those problems if you allow sort of unthinking development in a place where there are certain dangers. The danger here is traffic. The danger out there is wildfire.
Mr. Hornby, you lived in California.
Yeah, so California is the desert. They're the foothills of LA. LA is growing so much, and they keep building their houses in the mountains. When I was in California, we called them wildfires because they were out in the mountains. There were no people out in the mountains because it's ridges and it burns every year. As soon as the El Nino, the winds change, one spark, next thing you know, all the tinder goes up. If you don't manage that brush, it's going to burn. If you build houses at the top of a mountain and all the brush is all the way down, your house is going to burn down. It's been like that since 1995 when I got to the United States. I don't know about before. As far as impact, I think what Mike was alluding to is I think there is going to be a supply, a huge increase in building supplies cost because of how many homes were lost. And we can't forget about North Carolina and how many homes were lost down there, too. So I think you're going to see building supplies go through the roof over the next 6 months, and that'll be the true economic impact. As far as global warming, climate change, I am not Bill Stubblefield. I think until we can get other countries to abide by the same laws that we have in the United States, we ain't going anywhere. Which is why you see us pull out of some of these agreements, is because if they're not doing it, what's the point in us? Like, we can still do our same thing. Why should we pay for it for other countries if they're not going to put it in? So, thoughts?
Joe Ferretti.
Well, yeah, sure, certainly a problem, Mike. But I think to channel Mr. Stubblefield, he would be concerned about the cutting back of funding to organizations and agencies like NOAA and the National Weather Service, and in the health realm, NIH, which is happening right now. There's going to be an effort to inject politics into the messaging and perhaps even into the data that those agencies produce. And it's that data that we rely on to form public policy. If that data is corrupted by politics, we're never going to get to the right answer on the extent and nature of climate change and what dangers are inherent with that problem. The canary in the coal mine here is going to be this. People can joke and say, well, if it gets cold, as I look out my window here and see snow on my lawn in Georgia, people can joke and say, well, I'll just get a coat and things like that. Well, go out and try to buy homeowners insurance today and see what's happening. There's companies pulling out of Florida and California and soon other jurisdictions in this country. They're not going to sell you homeowners insurance. So if that fire or that flood in western North Carolina hits your home, you're out of luck. And that's what's going to happen because these insurance companies are the canary in the coal mine. They're telling you that we are suffering losses that we can't pay any longer, or we're going to charge you exorbitant rates in order to cover those losses. So this is going to come home real soon for a lot of us going forward. And I fear that the folks who are charged with the responsibility of figuring out these problems are going to be influenced in the wrong direction.
Well, it's intricately layered on top of that, Joe. All these automobiles that are being destroyed means more automobiles replaced by insurance claims, and then you end up paying more on your car insurance. In Florida, CBS had a report on our morning show a couple of weeks ago in regards to so many condo associations in Florida. So much of the development is condominiums, and those are maintained by homeowners association dues. And they're starting to see this incredible number of condominiums coming on the market because people are being assessed to repair hurricane damage, $20,000, $30,000 one-time assessments. And a lot of senior citizens buy those condos, and they can't afford it. So the condos are going on the market. And as the more and more of them go on the market, the value of those condominiums drops even further. And who wants to buy a condominium in an association where the first thing that's going to happen when you move in is you're going to be hit with the one-time fee of $25,000 or $30,000 to repair all the condos, your share of the repair bills for all the condos in your community too. So there's a lot of layers to this that haven't even really been discussed yet, and that involves the real estate market as well.
And the fewer people in the condos, the more your assessment's going to be because there are a few people to pay the
as
assessment.
they sell them, the assessment will be paid. I mean, because it's assessed on the condo or put a lien on the condo. So when you sell it, you'll get. And I mean, it is Florida. You're not selling a condo for less than a couple of $100,000 at least.
If you can find a buyer. Fewer people are now moving to Florida for winter vacation.
It's still the largest retirement community in the United States.
It is, but that may start to change a little bit. Final thought is yours, Mike, 60 seconds.
using the term climate change is a lot better than global warming, because my daughter told me that the temperature in New Orleans was the lowest it had been since 1895.
I think they had 10 inches of snow.
Yeah.
Did they not? And at Florida State University, they had a feature on all the co-eds running around playing in snow that they hadn't seen in a long time. So I think they said it was 1989 the last time, if I remember hearing those dates correctly. Well, that'll wrap up the general session, ladies and gentlemen. And when you come back, give me your Super Bowl picks, too, as we head into the break here. Who you got? Who's headed to the Super Bowl here, Mike?
I'm going to go with Buffalo and Washington.
Michael?
I like the same ones, Buffalo and Washington.
David?
I'm down with that. Buffalo and Washington.
Buffalo and Philly.
Joe Ferretti?
Chiefs and Commanders.
Ooh, there you go. Final thoughts, 8 seconds apiece next. Final thoughts, 8 seconds apiece. Joe Ferretti, go.
Was happy about the governor's focus on teacher pay. I hope that's locality pay.
Larry Schultz.
Go Bills.
David Valente.
It is never okay to be a Nazi or show Nazi salutes.
Was that to Elon?
Yeah.
It was
Michael
from his heart.
Carl. Michael Carl.
Go
Jeez.
Commanders, Redskins.
Mr. Hornby.
The abuse stops in 30 seconds. Thank God.
Oh, no, the mics are off. It just picks up.
Yeah, we just go to other mechanisms.
Looking forward to working
how that
with
works.
Delegate Masters.
Dave Ramsey Show is coming up next. This is Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg and TV 10. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again in 70 short hours.